Cześć. Zapraszam Was serdecznie na mój wywiad z Lelandem Sklarem, czyli wybitnym basistą, muzykiem sesyjnym, który ma na koncie przeszło 1200 sesji nagraniowych. Jego partię basu słyszycie m.in. w takich utworach jak Another Day in Paradise Phila Collinsa. Nagrywał też z takimi artystami jak Dolly Parton, Joe Cocker, Rod Stewart, James Taylor, zespół Toto i tak można byłoby wymieniać bez końca. Leland prowadzi również swój kanał na YouTube, gdzie opowiada różne historie ze swojej długoletniej kariery, która trwa przeszło 55 lat. Prezentuje również, w jaki sposób nagrywał partię basu na różne utwory, często wielkie przeboje muzyki rozrywkowej. Jest też autorem książki Everybody Loves Me, którą Wam gorąco polecam. Zatem zapraszam Was na wywiad przed Państwem Leland Sklar.
Hello, Leland. Nice to see you and hear you.
It's good to see you too. So, where in Poland are you?
I am from Łódź. It is central of Poland, not too far from Warsaw. Do you know the Łódź town?
Yeah.
You know it. Okay.
Well, my mother's family came from Poland.
Okay.
My father's his family was Ukrainian, and my mother's family was Polish. So,
Okay.
I feel a connection here.
So maybe some way we are,
Related.
family, some kind related. Exactly. Okay, Leland, how you remember your recording session with Billy Cobham Spectrum album? What are your thoughts about especially Tommy Bolin playing? Because I think it was a little different than later when he played in Deep Purple. So what do you can recall from this recording?
Well, I have a lot of memories. First off, as far as Tommy Bolin goes, he was in the late 60s. He was in a band called Zephyr. And I was in a band called Wolfgang, and we were managed by the same people. So we were doing gigs together. So I knew Tommy way back in 1968 and was completely blown away by his playing then. He was still one of the finest guitar players I'd ever known. Our band in the early 70s, it was James Taylor and Jackson Brown's band called The Section. We went on the road opening for Mahavishnu Orchestra. And I got to know the guys. I got to know Billy Cobham there by being on tour with them. And when that tour ended, Billy called me and he said, I got a record deal. Would you come to New York and play on my record? And I said, I'd love to. I assumed it would be Billy and Jan Hammer. But I didn't know any particulars about it. So I flew to New York, I think on a Sunday night on a late night flight, and got to New York and went right to Electric Lady Studios Monday morning. And I walked in and I said hi to Billy, I said hi to Jan, and I looked over and I saw Tommy. And I said, what are you doing here? And he said, I'm playing on this thing, because Billy had become aware of him also. And we just hunkered down in the studio, and literally we did all of our tracks in 2 days on that with Ken Scott Engineering. But it was a magical experience. I was totally had no idea what we were going to be recording. I had not heard any of the material or anything like that. So when we got in the studio, apparently Tommy had come in a day early to work on the heads of the tunes with Jan. And when I got there, Jan and I just ran over the heads on the different songs, and we just started recording and basically got each song within 2 takes. So we got everything done. There were 2 tracks on that album that they cut on the third day with a big band, and Ron Carter was playing bass on those. But all the other tracks we cut, and everything was live. There's no overdubs on it at all. Every one of Tommy's solos were live solos. As a matter of fact, I forget which track it is, but on one of them, he and Jan were trading licks back and forth on this thing. And about halfway through the solo section, you hear Tommy going, rah, 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 and you hear, and he broke his E string
Mm.
and kept right on playing. I mean, he was unfazed by it. And it's still on the record. I mean, I hear it every time I listen to it. I can hear him breaking his E string. And it was just one of those experiences that went by so fast that we almost didn't even realize what we had just recorded. And but it's so interesting to me that from 1973 to now, if I walk into any studio or any situation and I start going do 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 do, guys jump all over it. They, to them, that's like the holy grail. And so I that's still one of my favorite projects that I've ever been involved with. And
Mhm.
and I'm still friends with Billy. Actually, I talked to Billy a while back, and he's toying with the idea of doing an orchestral version of Spectrum next year. And he said, do you want to play on it?" And I said, "I'd love to. Are you kidding? If my schedule permits, count me in." So we'll see what happens with that. But it is, again, that is just one of those projects that when I look back on my career, that's one of the ones that really still stands out. And that, when I do clinics or master classes, that's one of the things that everybody wants to talk about.
Mhm. Yeah, that's why I'm asking you about it. And because I'm great fan of Deep Purple and of course Tommy Bolin playing also with this funky style. I think later on he played a little different than on this Billy Cobham record, but yeah.
Yeah.
Have
Well,
you ever met? Yeah.
he was also different in the James Gang when he came into the James Gang. I mean, he kind of became whatever the project that he was doing was. And I know that Jeff Beck talked about it many times that when he heard Spectrum, it changed the way he approached his guitar playing after he heard the way Tommy played. Yeah, and I met Jeff several times, and every time I'd see him, he'd run up to me and go, "Stratus, Stratus," because and he would always play Stratus in his shows too. Yeah,
In your childhood, you played on the piano, yeah, and a lot, and you were very good in it, in playing this piano. I think it somehow also prepared you to become bass player, yeah. To in some way, as you play on the piano, it also comes to play on the bass, and you know some picks, and you know what I mean, yeah.
yeah. I started playing piano when I was 5 years old, and I studied only classical. And by the time I was 12 years old, I had already done lots of recitals and I had won a lot of awards. Uh, but I was when I got at that point when we in the States, when you're 12 years old, you go into junior high school. And so I went into junior high school assuming I would be in the music department and play piano. And the music teacher said, "We have lots of kids that play piano, but we really need a string bass player." And he pulled out a string bass and showed me how to hold it. And I plucked a note on it and felt the vibration in it. And I said, "Let's do it." And he gave me some rudimentary lessons on how to play. And excuse me, at that point, I was ready for something different in my life. And I fell in love with the bass. I loved the psychology of it, um, where it sits in the orchestra, as a foundation instrument. And so I continued with that and eventually had serious teachers when I kept studying. I was only playing upright at that point, string bass. But I was always in bands and I was always frustrated because you really couldn't be heard. You're fighting the drums and everything. And there wasn't like nowadays, there's a lot of really great microphones and stuff that are available. I was a kid back then, so I was just playing as hard as I could to be heard. And eventually, my father took me to a music store and bought me a St. George amp and a melody bass, an inexpensive Japanese bass. And that changed everything for me because all of a sudden, I was heard in the band. And I went on like that for years. When I was in college, I was a science major and art major. I wasn't a music major, but I was always in bands. And in the late '60s, I was in this band Wolfgang that Tommy Bolin, where I met Tommy, and it was through that band that I met James Taylor. And all of a sudden, my whole life turned around and changed. I thought I was going to play one show with this guy, and it turned out to be he was the face of an entire new movement in music. And I was fortunate enough to be there for that. And through that, then all of a sudden, myself and Russ Kunkel and Danny Korchmar and the guys who became the section went from kind of no studio experience to being the first call guys in town. And as my career started to evolve at that point, I was really fortunate that I had come out of classical piano because I was at that point a strong reader. So I could start doing movies and television and commercials and all of that, which was all required reading. And some sessions that required reading. Most of the sessions we were doing, they were really asking us just to come up with parts on that. That was the whole thing about us is we actually really understood the songs and came up with parts that pull them all together. But the reading really opened other doors for me. So I always feel very fortunate that I did come out of the piano background because it really it was a great education for me, and I was able to really broaden my horizon when I got started, and still out here on the road and still recording. So, it's been 56 years I've been doing this, and I still enjoy it every day.
Your first recording session was, I guess, okay, there is some page that is called Discogs, and
Yeah.
there we can check all with whom the exact musician play and with whom he recorded during his career. Yeah. So the
Yeah.
first record I see is from 1967. I guess it was your first band that you record with. Do you remember this? Can you recall this recording
Oh,
session?
yeah. It never was released. It was only a demo session.
Uh-huh.
And I still have the music here. I mean, I've got it in my computer, and it was the band Wolfgang that
Yeah,
where I met James.
exactly.
And
Yeah.
but my first official session that actually got released was an artist named Brian Hyland, and I ended up on that because uh, Brian Brian in the mid '60s had a kind of a novelty hit called "Itsy Bitsy Teensy Weensy Yellow Polka Dot Bikini,"
Oh my God.
and it was a real big novelty record. But when I went in the studio with him, we cut one of the classic songs, "Gypsy Woman," which became a hit for him. But I think I got that gig because I did this one show with James Taylor at the Troubadour in Los Angeles, the Troubadour Club. And I believe Brian was at that show with his producer, Del Shannon, who was also a big 1960s star and was producing and he was producing Brian. And they called me and Russ Kunkel to work on his album. And that was the first time actually went in the studio and was paid to, play on somebody's record. Uh, the next thing I did was James Taylor's. I think it was Mudslide Slim was like the second thing I was involved with. But the first James Taylor record, they had just finished that when I met James, so I didn't get started until that album. But it was an amazing period. I mean, things were moving so fast, and with the advent of James Taylor being the kind of the figurehead of the singer-songwriter West Coast movement, all of a sudden the record labels were signing, the Jackson Browns and the Linda Ronstadts and all of these different artists that became that sound. And when the producers would be doing those, they would look at James Taylor's record and see our names on it. And they would go, if they're good enough for James Taylor, let's get them. And all of a sudden, literally went from having no experience except one demo session to working constantly around the clock. So it was a pivotal point in my life.
Is it true that you have on your account around 1,200 recording sessions? Have you ever counted?
No, I mean I've had people where I've done things in the past where they kind of estimated and they kind of figured it was somewhere around 2,600 albums.
Okay.
So I mean I've probably recorded maybe around 25,000 songs over all these years, and it's the thing for me that's been great is it's been such an adventure doing this because as a studio player, I could be doing Billy Cobham one day, and then the next day I could be working with Carole King, and then the next day I would be working on a movie, Forrest Gump or something like that. So it's been, I think the thing that's kept my enthusiasm and excitement about this business is the variety of music that I've gotten to play. As much as it would have been great to have been in a band that was successful, that never quite happened. Even though I was in a bunch of bands, but none of them ever got to that next level. But I would not want to give up the real special thing about being a studio guy is the fact that you get to work with so many different artists on so many different genres. So I feel very fortunate. I'm really have no complaints.
Mhm. Also on this Discogs, I checked one
Yeah.
thing. Is it true? Have you ever played drums on a Hoyt Axton album, Pistol Packing Mama from 1982?
If they put drums, that's a mistake. I did play bass on that album, but I never played drums. I mean, they might have had us all come in and do like hand claps or something, like some percussion. But no, I work with too many good drummers to ever to be stupid enough to get behind a drum kit. So, but I did several albums with Hoyt, and he was a dear friend. So I know I worked on that album, but it would have been as a bass player primarily.
Anyway, it's developed you as a musician, as you said, because you play in so many genres, from jazz, soul, blues. Okay, I remind myself about one thing, because you play also, for example, on Alice Cooper album, yeah, from
Yeah.
1989. How you recall this session? Because, generally you are connected more with soft rock, country rock, maybe folk rock, maybe this kind of genre, but not this harder. I know that you like that kind of music, but how you
Yeah.
recall recording with Alice Cooper?
Well, I had known Alice since the late 60s. And so when I got called to come in and work on that, it was like seeing an old friend. Um, but the thing is that because of starting with James Taylor and Jackson Browne and all that, we were all associated with soft rock. But when I met James Taylor, Wolfgang was a real hard rock band, and I was listening to Hendrix and Cream and 10 Years After and all those kind of bands. So it was actually weirder for me to start playing James Taylor music than anything. But I still get called to do like Japanese metal albums and all kinds of stuff. I mean, that's really, like I said, is the fun part of it. So Alice fit right in to it. It was really fun. We had a great time and the band was great. And that was also back at a time where most of the sessions we did for so many years were the full band in the studio and the artist was there and everything, as compared to so much now where you're just going in and overdubbing. And it's I'm grateful to be working and we still turn out good music, but the real excitement about this for me has always been being in a room with creative people and kicking ideas back and forth. Hear the guitar player play a lick and you go, what was that? Play that again. And then you join in, you maybe come up with like double it up or something like that. Or being on projects where it would be like a James Taylor coming in and just playing acoustic guitar. And then we would start to go, let's do an intro. Let's create a bridge. The band had real integral parts in the kind of the creation of the tracks for the albums. And so back like when I was with Alice, we were in the studio with a full band, so everybody was having fun in there and kicking ideas around. I mean, I would have loved to have done more with him, you know, but I've been around all that kind of stuff. I mean, when I would work with Toto or people like that, it was, it's just exciting to be in that environment, kind of no matter what the genre is. Could be country or jazz or whatever.
You even play with such legendary blues artists like George Harmonica Smith, Big Mama
Yeah.
Thompson, Jimmy Reed. I think there are from different genre, different, I can say, old school of recording, because some of them started their careers even in 40s, yeah?
Oh yeah.
So how you recall recording with such artists, because they mindfulness, they mind seems different than the next generation. How you recall it?
Well, the thing that was always fun when you would work with like an older artist, um, they would not necessarily be aware of new technology. And all of a sudden they're in the studio and you kind of watch them and it's almost like watching a child discovering something. It's like there was an actor in the States, Andy Griffith, who had a show, the Andy Griffith Show, and I grew up with that. And wonderful actor, but on his TV show, he always would do a song and he'd play his guitar on it. Well, I got called to do 2 albums with him, and when we got in the studio to do the first album, he was elderly at that point, and he was really nervous about it because he didn't know if he could sing a song from beginning to end, and do it right. And we looked at him and said, "You don't have to. We'll do a few vocals and we can comp it. And if there's anything wrong, he didn't know anything about comping or how to edit like that. And he was thrilled. All of a sudden, he was relaxed and he really enjoyed himself because the pressure wasn't there to be perfect from beginning to end. And I think I've met old artists that discovered that, and then I end up on projects with really young artists. I still work with artists in their late teens and early 20s, and they have no idea like what analog recording was like or anything like that. They've really only known Pro Tools and different you know digital formats. And you get in the studio with them, and some of them are really curious, and they want to talk to you about what it was like recording on tape and all of that. And it's really fun just to sit and be able to tell them stories about what it was like in the same way, like when I work with somebody older than me, and they tell us, what it was like when they were first starting. And some of them I'd worked with had only done direct to disc recording. They had never done multi-track. And so it's a vibrant and living process. And as technology, goes on, new things start to happen. But a lot of times the new technology comes in, and after a while, people start going, "Yeah, I kind of like the way we used to do it." And all of a sudden, I see studios firing up their old 24 tracks, and getting their hands on tape again, and you're in there cutting multi-track again. And so the pen, as they say, the pendulum is always swinging back and forth. And I never say things are over, because 10 years from now, something you thought was over suddenly is going to be back in, like vintage instruments, where for a while it was strictly synths with plugins. And all of a sudden I go to sessions now and guys are dragging out their old Wurlitzer pianos and their old Fender Rhodes pianos. And it all works. It depends. Mostly it depends on the music you're doing, where some music is absolutely has to be done in a very specific way. And other times you can play around with things, and it keeps it interesting that way. The hardest thing I think is for some of the engineers, because you have the older engineers who are dying away at this point, like the Al Schmitz and the Ed Cherneys, who really were the masters of, tape recording and all that. So you suddenly end up where somebody wants to do a project on tape, and the engineer has never has set up microphones, or everything's always been direct. So it can be a challenge for some of the younger engineers really being kind of put in a position where they really don't quite know how to do all this. But that's how it works.
Uh, that's great experience anyway. You play with such long generations from the, the old school and now the younger one. Last session that you take part with us for now, last recording session that you remember now from nowadays. What have you done lately?
Well, we just finished a new Barbara Streisand album. It's all duets. She's singing with James Taylor and Sam Smith and Sting, uh, uh, Ariana Grande. So we just did that. That album just came out. There's a country artist, Reba McEntire, and I just finished doing tracks for her. She hasn't been able, excuse me, been able to get in yet and finish her vocals on it because she's got some TV commitments that she's doing. But there's that. I've done a couple of projects. When I'm on tour right now, and I have people sending me files, and I have a setup out here for recording. So I've been working on projects while I'm out here on the road. Uh, but there was oh God, I'm blanking on his name right now. Uh, his last name is Del Vecchio. He's an Italian metal.
Alessandro Del Vecchio,
Alessandro Del Vecchio. Yeah,
keyboard player, yeah, keyboard
yeah,
player, yeah.
I just worked on like 18 tracks for him while I was on the road this past year. So there's always something going on. I'm always, at it. But the most recent release has been the Barbara Streisand album that just came out, and I've been featuring that on my YouTube channel.
Okay, let's talk about your YouTube channel because you set it up. I guess in the pandemic times. Yes, you set up this YouTube channel, and you're just very talking about very interesting stuff from the past. How you record this song or this song. How you what came to your mind when you set up this YouTube channel? Why you uh, created it?
Well, I never even intended to be doing a YouTube channel. What happened was, first off, when the pandemic happened, I looked at my calendar and it was a busy year, and all of a sudden there was nothing like everybody else because all the shows, all the sessions were canceled, all of the concerts were canceled, and all that. And you find yourself sitting there going, now what am I going to do? But we had just come off of shortly, a couple of 2 years or so before that, Phil Collins is Not Dead Yet tour, the last tour that we did with Phil as a solo artist. And I had some guys writing to me from different countries, South America and Germany, all over the place, going, we saw the concert. They loved the concert, but a lot of those shows were in stadiums. And they were just kind of going, we couldn't hear like all the details of, parts. And so what I ended up doing was I contacted our front of house mixer, Michel Collin, and had him send me a couple of board mixes, board tapes that he had from a couple of the shows. One of them was from Adelaide, Australia, and I thought, well, what the hell? I loaded it into my laptop and set up a little amp next to me, and had just a little Bose speaker. And then I would take, my phone, and I would just set it on my. I set up I was sitting at a desk, and I had a selfie stick, and I bolted that to the drawer and then put my camera in it. I mean, I still do it that way. It's so primitive, but what I did was I started with the first song of the show, the first day I did this, and I played along with that, but I had the amp louder than the track so you could hear every note of the bass. And so I showed the first day, and then the second day I did the second song. And by the third day, I had people writing to me going, "Oh, we love your YouTube channel." And I was going, "What are you talking about?" I had no idea. And I just fell in love with doing it. And I mean, went on for a long time that way, just because the pandemic went on and on. But when I finished that entire show, when I went all the way, the only song I didn't do, and I'm saving that for when I finally decide to end my YouTube channel. The last song we would always do is Take Me Home with Phil
Mhm.
Collins. So I figured that'll be the last thing I'll play, at some point. But when I finished the rest of that show, I was enjoying it and I thought, what am I going to do now? So I started digging and I pulled out like James Taylor and Jackson Brown and all these things. And what I was doing was showing the bass parts to all of these songs. But there are also a lot of songs that the real magic happened in the studio, and there was no way to reproduce it sitting at
Mhm.
home.
Mhm.
Things like Gene Clark's No Other album. On that track, I think I have six basses on it, and so there was no way I could do that. So then I started to say to people, "Look, I'll tell you all about the session and we'll talk." And I always talk about who the musicians were, what studio, the producer, engineers. But I said, let me just listen with you. And so a lot of the music on the thing, I'm just sitting here listening along with it and telling stories. But it's going on almost 2,000 videos now.
Mhm.
So, and there's over a quarter of a million people on the channel. So it's been really fun. And I film every day out here on the road, the venues that we play, and show people all the backs, the attics, the basements, the backstage. Because when people come to a concert, they see they walk in the door and then they go sit in their seat, and that's all they ever get to see. So I'm kind of showing them all the dirty little secrets that can also be, and introducing them. I'm interviewing a lot of the musicians I work with, and it's been something that really surprised me. I really enjoyed it, and I have no intention of stopping. When we finish up with our video right now, I've got another one I'm going to do with another artist I found, because it's kind of like you talk about Wikipedia and all
Mhm.
and those things. I mean, I've spent so much time now just kind of like forensics of digging through that and finding projects I totally forgot about.
Mhm.
And so it's been real interesting for me to actually address my career, which I never thought about before. To me, all I cared about is what am I doing today? What am I doing tomorrow? Not what did I do yesterday? And now, when this channel started, suddenly I was having to think about what my history. And so it's been really nice, and it's been weird at times. I'm going, God, how could I have forgotten that? Or, you know, and then I do comparative ones because a lot of times I've worked with several artists doing the same songs,
Yeah.
and showing off the difference of how you approach it with a different artist and things like that. So,
Yeah, it's kind of impressive because a big library and a lot of interesting videos, and you have also a lot of subscribers. I can send and
yeah.
a lot of views of this video. The most fruitful day in recording studio in your career? I mean, the day, or maybe 2 days, I don't know, where in a row when you recorded many songs that become hits, or have you have something like that in mind? Do you
Oh,
recall?
um, there's been so many. I mean, I remember when Phil Collins called me and asked me to fly to London in 1984 to do his No Jacket Required album. And just sitting in Townhouse Studios with Phil and Hugh Padgham engineering and working on these songs. I mean, I just kind of sat there going, this is really cool. This is really great. But there's been so many over the years. It'd be really hard to say. I really find it so exciting whenever I get to go into a studio and work on stuff. And there are times when you walk in and somebody will play you a song and you just go, "Oh man, this is so good. This is going to be really great." And there's other times you go in and you go, "It's not so great. It isn't." But you're having a good experience. So it's like you don't judge everything by is it going to be a hit or anything. I walk in my old, especially in the days when I'd walk in the studio and I would look over and there would be Jeff Porcaro sitting
Mhm.
there. And
Mhm.
whatever we were working on, I knew it was going to be a great day because I was playing with Jeff, who was one of my best friends. So it was more. for me, not so much the music as much as the relationships, especially with drummers. When I would, be in the studio with Russ Kunkel, who I've worked with forever, or I'd be in with Jeff Porcaro or Carlos Vega or Vinny Colaiuta or Dave Weckl or John Robinson and Jim Keltner and Jim Gore. I mean, every time I'd walk in, it was like a family all the time for us. So, but there were always fun projects that you would do. I remember getting called to go in. Uh, there was a studio in town called Larrabee Studios down in Hollywood, and we would do cartoon shows there back in the 70s. And then I remember getting called once to go down, and it ended up being we ended up cutting "It's Raining Men," which became one of the great anthems of the disco period. And we were all kind of going, "What is this one? This is, but you walk out of there, everybody's having fun and smiling and just going, this was really a fun date. So there's, but for me, the amount of sessions I've done over all these years, the, so many of them really come back to me as really joyous. The first Jackson Browne album with Dr. My Eyes, being in the studio cutting that, very unorthodox because it was myself, but Russ Kunkel did not play drums on the original track. He played congas and then overdubbed the drums. And then after we finished the track, then the great Jesse Ed Davis showed up and put a guitar solo on it. And at the end of the day, we're all just kind of looking at each other going, this is really cool. This was a great thing. And that whole album was great. And the James Taylor albums and sitting in the studio with, Linda Ronstadt and Aaron Neville singing together. It's like, I sort of, I'm still a fanboy. I still pinch myself every time I get to do any of these things. And